connection bonds and builds the bond, the intimacy between people. It brings trust, it brings healing. And in leadership, that's the glue that holds the team together. What does it mean when I say connection is my currency? So as you see me here, it's my first in-person presentation since my retina detached. Now, and that's what I shared with KK. It's amazing how you feel very comfortable doing something at some stage, and then there's some intervention that happens, and that you have the risk of losing your eyesight. And an emergency operation, fortunately, was restored. But what it left me with was double vision. So now what I'm sitting is I've got glasses for working on a computer, and I've got glasses for seeing far, and then the same glasses I sometimes can't see my own writing, and sometimes when the lights are in my eyes, it's another challenge. But it's so amazing that when you just get out there and say, well, life happens, and let us just embrace it. We don't have to be perfect. And this actually ties so lovely into the conversation that I'm going to have with you tonight, is we need to connect with ourselves first. Let go of all the fears, let go of all the judgment, internally and externally, and just be. So that's the part that I shared with KK. Now tonight, I want to really thank you. Okay, thank you for being led to push me and kick me into the waters and let me swim. And thank you for the opportunity for everyone being here. I love the fact that there's more men than women here. Because I think that maybe the men need to hear what I have to say. Maybe a little bit more. So I salute men and I salute the women as well. And I want to ask, just quickly by show of hands, the successes in your life. If I have to ask you, what played the biggest role? Who you knew or what you knew? What played the biggest role in your life? Is it who you know or what you know? Who? Absolutely, I absolutely agree with you. Because at the core of everything, it's connection. That's really what it's about. So connection is my lane. And currency. I called it because this is what I stand for. Tonight I'm going to show you why connection is my currency. Who want to know? Now, KK actually mentioned that over 30 years, so I've got a long history of how I got here, and I'm not going to go and bore you with all of that detail. But working over 3 decades, from individuals to couples, to teams, to businesses, to every possible position that people could have relationships in. What I have worked with was to help people to establish the trust, establish connection, really find the way back to one another. So connection has always been what I aim to go. So it's quite easy for me. It drives me to say is the quality of our connections determines the quality of our life. Now, this is now where I have to just quickly have a look. What does it mean when I say connection is my currency? Now, in relationships, when we're going to talk about relationships, what is important for us to say, connection bonds and builds the bond, the intimacy between people. It brings trust, it brings healing. And in leadership, that's the glue that holds the team together. And when we go into business, that turns audiences and communities into raving loyal supporters and clients. So the one thing that I would like you to really focus on is connection is the investment, the one investment that never ever loses value. Now, let me just step back. What I would like us to realize, and in connection over the years that I worked with it, I've realized that there's three fundamentals, three foundations that underlies connections. And I call them the engines of sustainable connection. They're actually very simple, but they're not always that easy to implement. But if you have them, you can absolutely reach for the stars. You can build lasting, sustainable relationships. Without them, businesses, leaders, relationships run on empty. So I'm going to help you to unpack that. And what are those three foundations? Now, the first one that I talk about is emotional intelligence plus relational intelligence is the double currency of connection. Now, what does that mean? Now, we've all heard of emotional intelligence. I'm sure. That's quite of a buzzword that's going around. That's when I stop for a moment, I become aware of my own emotions, I regulate my own emotions, I have a sense of your emotions, and then we find and decide, how do we navigate through this? Very important. Emotional intelligence is that inner compass. It guides you, but it's not enough. Relational intelligence is the outer bridge that helps us to really connect with one another. We need to find that if we don't have the relational intelligence, and that's exactly what I work with, because that's where the skills of how we connect, what do we do, what are the actions that we take, that's what comes in when we talk about relational intelligence. That gives us the capacity. So emotional intelligence gives us the insight, the clarity. So together, emotional intelligence plus relational intelligence equals insight and impact. The first pillar, if we don't have that pillar, we're starting off on the back foot. Now, how many of you have sat in a room, have actually seen somebody walking in with quite a strong sense of reading the room, being able to look at them, see sort of that one is uncomfortable, that one is not in a good space, you can look at the body language, but they don't have the ability to relate or connect. They stand in the corner. How many of you have experienced that? That the person is actually, that person has got emotional intelligence, but they're lacking the relational intelligence. Knowing how to reach out, how to connect, what to do with the person to bring that connection stronger. Now, the second pillar that we're talking about is how we relate is how we lead. Now that we understand emotional intelligence and we understand relational intelligence and how important that is to bring that together, it's important, and we just heard, that people need to be able to relate. Now, whether I work with people at home, in couples trying to build their intimacy and their connection with one another, or whether I work at work with people that are trying to repair connections or relationships after a breakup, of trust in the relationship, or whether I work in leadership, fostering a culture where people can really speak up and feel safe and have the courage to contribute. In all of that, safety is important. If there's not safety, you can be rest assured there's going to be disconnection. What we need is the same principle. Leadership is relational. We cannot just stand there and have the emotional intelligence, but we do not know how to connect and relate with people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, if you have to ask yourself, in which relationship, whether it's in love, whether it's in life, whether it's in business, if you could go and have one honest conversation today that can shift the relationship, where would that be? So that we can go in and not only see the person, but find a way to have a conversation to actually connect with them. So in the back of your mind, just think a bit about that. Now, that brings us to the third, well, that's the previous one. The third one. Am I now even further back? Yeah. KK, you and I have the same challenge. There we go. The third one. Now, we all have heard, we've spoken about emotional and relational intelligence. And we know that that's important because that guides individuals. And now we've talked about relating to people shapes leadership. And now what is really important, culture, and this is the third pillar, culture is connection made visible. So culture is the multiplier. The moment that we know that the foundation, the first pillar is in place, we've got the EQ, we've got the RQ, we've got the connection that we're starting to lead, how we relate with people. When we go in and we have the culture, it multiplies it. At home, you can very quickly see what is the culture that happens at home. It's how they handle tension, how conflicts being resolved, how they go out and have a repair. If you go into teams, and there you can quickly see how they handle tension. And you know, it's easy to handle tension when everything's going well, because that's a little bit of adrenaline. But you can see the culture when people are actually under stress. The third one, if you go and you see business culture is felt as what do people say about your business when they walk away from you? Culture is something that we feel. It's something that we protrude, that we show. It's something. It's how we act, how we relate, and it's so important for us to really remember that culture reflects your connection. Now, I have seen so many times. It's one of the easiest things to pick up, is when people are not connecting with you. If there's a culture of not connecting, you will see that people don't show commitment. The moment that there's a culture of not connecting, you will very quickly see that too. So it's so important for us to really drive that in. And we all create cultures every day, everywhere we go. My question to you is, are you creating a culture? And is that culture a culture of connection? Or is it a culture of disconnection? Now, that brings me, and I would like us to stop really and reflect today. If connection is truly the currency of humanity, how are you spending it? We've spoken about EQ and how EQ brings clarity. We've spoken about relational intelligence and how that builds trust and connection. And we know that that is both important. EQ plus RQ gives us insight and impact. Now, for me, it's a no-brainer. Connection is my currency. And when I work with people, from individuals, from couples, from business, from teams, when I get them to connect, they absolutely start flourishing. And you know what happens? Everybody wins. And then connection is no longer just my currency. Then connection is everyone's currency. I want you to stop for a moment and whisper, close your eyes and whisper to yourself. If connection was my currency, what would I be rich in?